And I remember going to see Peter Gabriel in 1980, and he was on the China 84 tour. And this is just a true story, right? I went along to see him. The support band were Random Hold. They were playing at Ex-Marillion. And I went in, and the PA went down, and he had loads of issues on stage. And he didn't deal with them at all well. And suddenly this person who had seen with Genesis on the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, you know, about four years before, I was watching this very nervous character. And I kind of saw him in a very different light, you know. And I went, wait a minute, you know, he's human, right? And after the gig, right, I walked out into the foyer, and there was a guy there who I was at school with called Gordon Feeney, who was a drummer. And he was the guy who was most likely to become a rock star in the school. You know, his dad bought him a drum kit. He was a great drummer. He was a big Carol Palmer fan and Premier kit, which was like, wow, right? And he was in the foyer, and he said, do you still want to become a singer? Because, you know, I talked about I'd love to be a singer. He says, do you still want to be a singer? And I went, yeah. And he said, do you want to audition for a band? He said, we've got a band called Not Quite Red Fox. He said, we're looking for a singer. And he said, yeah. He said, I'll give you a bell. And I went, whoa, an opening. And I remember leaving the foyer, and I thought, you know what? I went round the back to the backstage door, and I knocked on the door and opened it. Says, hello, I'm a German journalist. My name is Dirk, and I'm supposed to be doing an interview with Peter, and my plane was late, and blah, blah, blah. And was face to face with Peter Gabriel, right? It wasn't even hang about. I basically walked through the door, and he was like, you know, he must have been moving about in the backstage area. And I was like, hi, Peter, how are you doing? And I said, really loved the show, and it was so different. I made up some, you know, like, it was really great. Can I get your autograph? And he autographed the ticket, and I've still got it. And it's reversed, right? So the autograph's in the back, and it's still on a framed yes poster from my very first gig. And all the tickets I went to in 1977. But I had Peter Gabriel's autograph, and I met him, and he was this little guy. And I went, you know what? I could do this. And it started to get me, my confidence started to bubble a little bit. And then I went to the audition, and it all fell apart, right? But I came out of the audition, and I was more determined than ever to become a singer in a band.